Oh, well, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody. I'm Gaël Blondelle. I'm the VP Ecosystem Development of the Eclipse Foundation. As you can hear, I'm one of the European staff members and even leading the European team of the Eclipse Foundation. And yeah, I'm few words maybe before we start. Few words about Eclipse. So we are a general purpose open source foundation hosting plenty of different projects in various domains, with these specificities that we do mostly business friendly open source. And that's very interesting today to have my two speakers with me, because they perfectly represent this approach of business friendly open source with the idea that we do open source with in mind the goal that our members will do business on top of those open source projects. Just one thing, because it's really hot news, is that in last May we announced that we were moving the Eclipse Foundation to Europe. So the Eclipse Foundation has been a US organization since 2004. And this morning, you can read it on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and hopefully in also newspapers today. This morning, we announced a very important milestone, which is the creation of Eclipse Foundation, AISBL, which stands for Association Internationale Sans But Lucratif. That's an international non-profit association in Brussels. And so as of today, we accept companies to become members of Eclipse Foundation in Europe. So that's really a big day for us. And personally, I'm really glad that it's the case. So let's come back to our topic of today. So this first entrepreneurial open source workshop, and late in late 2020, we started to publish case studies with our members. So the first one was with Cedalo. So Philipp Struss is the CEO and co-founder of Cedalo. And yes, your company was a topic of this first case study. And earlier this week, we published our second case study about Obeo. And so Cédric Brun here is the CEO of Obeo. So thanks guys for joining me today to go through this approach of entrepreneurial open source. And yeah, so the way we do it is no presentation, just a conversation. So we have some questions that hopefully will get us busy for the next 40 minutes, and then everybody can use the features like Q&A feature in Zoom webinar, and we will also monitor the chat. So feel free to add your questions and to add something in the chat if you have a specific question, and we will try to address that either during our conversation or specifically at the end. So, well, let's start with you, Cédric. So, well, I know for some reasons that Obeo has been a member of the Eclipse Foundation for a long time. So can you tell us a bit more about what made you interested in becoming a member of Eclipse so long ago?
Yeah, well, being a member of the Eclipse Foundation is really tied to the history of Obio. And well, at first, when Obio was founded 15 years ago now, so it's yeah, quite a few years already, and open source was already part of our DNA, definitely. On my end, I was already contributing to various open source projects as a student, either in the Linux kernel or in KDE, on whatever project I was using. And I was really excited by modeling, code generation and tooling in general. And this focus on open source was a key factor for me to join Obio, which was just founded. And it all started with the Cedalo project, which is now an Eclipse project, but was not at the time. It had technical ties with Eclipse, as it was an Eclipse plugin, but it was not an Eclipse project in the sense that it was not part of the Eclipse community and hosted by the Eclipse Foundation. And this project will provide capabilities to create code generators from models. And we got more and more involved with the Eclipse community online and at events. And because of that, we started the next project as an Eclipse project. And the actual first Eclipse project for Obio is EMF Compare, which we set up with Intalio at the time. Antoine told me from Intalio at the time, and to compare on version any model. And well, working on an open source project was really important for us, because it also meant we could collaborate openly with many top developers, architects from other organizations, and collaborate with them on our problems, with very smart people from all these companies like IBM, Borlon, and Red Hat now, and so on. Well, so many great people working for this company, and you learn a lot, and the team learned a lot, and that made us grow. But these activities contributed to bootstrap our open source business model, working with the community. And this gave us more visibility, led to being in touch with users, organizations interested in modeling technologies. And we led and contributed to many more projects in Eclipse since then, like Eclipse Serious. And we currently lead more than 6 Eclipse projects. Wow. So it all went kind of naturally, right? We started by participating, and then it made sense. And well, we care for the Eclipse Foundation to be a good host of open source projects. We have then a strong connection in between our business activities and the Eclipse Foundation. And we wanted to have a say on the way it's run, on its objectives, and on the rules of governance for the long term.
So that's where you decided to become a strategic member.
That's when we decided to, upgrade to strategic member, exactly.
And so just being a strategic member means that you have a seat of right at the board of directors of the Eclipse Foundation. And so it also means that you are seated at the same tables and giant companies like IBM, Red Hat, Bosch, SAP. So how is it?
Well, it's definitely a bit humbling, because we are now 50 people working at Obio, so nowhere near close to these giants, I would say. But we care, and we are committed to make this place the best framework, not as in technical framework, but as general framework for developing lasting, innovative technologies. And being a strategic member means we contribute in evolving the governance and the direction of the foundation. Furthermore, to the general public, it gave credibility to the company and a clear message. Obio's commitment to open source is at the strategic level. Many developers are working full-time on the open source products, and this made us visible to great corporations and led us with long-term partnerships. Notably, for instance, our relationship with Thales, or more recently with Siemens.
Okay. So Philippe, you are not at your company is not a strategic member, but that's what's interesting, in my opinion, in what I want to hear from you is that Cédric just told us that the story about Eclipse modeling, which is, I would say, more of the core history of the Eclipse Foundation, but your company, you joined in the context of the IoT working group. So tell us more about what made you take the decision to join the Eclipse IoT working group.
Yeah, there are obviously a couple of points that are very similar here to what Cedric just said. So the beginning of the story is maybe a little bit different because we have two projects that we drive forward. One is the Mosquito broker, the other one is Eclipse Stream Sheets, both in the same work group, in the IoT work group. And the Mosquito project is actually a project that's been around actually a little bit longer than Cedalo already. And what we basically did is we loved the project quite a lot, and we put ourselves behind that and basically included that and put, so to say, like a real company behind it to drive it forward. And as the Mosquito project was already in there, we obviously already had the link to Eclipse. However, then the next step was basically also to join as a company formally, and the whole idea behind this was really also to boost the visibility of the company itself and what we actually do, and then to get the message across that this project that's been out there now has also like a stronger foundation now. And the next thing then is also we developed and we obviously still develop and continue to develop and further improve Eclipse Stream Sheets, and that's something else, another technology. I'm happy to talk a little bit about that later on as well. It works very well together with this Mosquito broker, and so we had one project already in there. So for that reason, it was actually quite natural to join. And then we had another technology that worked really, really well with this project together with this technology. So actually to offer it in the same kind of way, to have the same user experience, to get it out there, basically, it made a lot of sense to actually first provide it in a similar fashion, so open source it, and then also to get it under the same umbrella there. And the big things that actually are there that really help, especially us there as well, is that Eclipse is very strong in the IoT sector. So in the working group, I'm not sure how many projects there are in there right now, but I think it's close to 50 or so, and really big companies as well as smaller ones. And there's really just a lot going on, so that's the right place to be. And then as a foundation itself, what also helps is definitely the reputation that it brings, and also to other users. So many of whom we don't even know. I mean, it's probably the same for Cedric there as well. You don't know them, but they're reassured. They have the security actually that everything you put in the code, for example, that you not only say it's open source, but they actually know that everything that's in there is also open source, which is very important for businesses, because otherwise they might run into liability issues or so. And that's just due to the whole process of getting an Eclipse project up and running, because you have to jump through a couple of due diligence hoops, so to say, to get it in there. And all that combined actually made it quite simple, and were the reasons, so to say, to join, the main drivers.
I think that Mosquito was one of the first projects in the Eclipse IoT working group, and because, well, MQTT is one of those rock stars technologies.
Absolutely. I mean, how it picked up, it's tremendous. I mean, it's over 20 years old, but the biggest boost just came throughout the last, I'd say, 8 years or so to IoT and everything that's has anything to do with connecting everything, so to say.
Okay, so well, if I summarize it, from what you just said, both of you, I hear collaborate with smart people, learn from the community, gaining visibility, the reputation, the good governance of the project, the IP management. And there's one question that I get asked very regularly, and I wonder, I'm really interested in your take on it. It is, how do you manage to make money with open source? So how do you get money? You give away your intellectual property, and so how do you make money? So Philipp, tell me.
Yeah, no, sure. Obviously, that's a question that also we are asked regularly, to be honest. Then especially from from businesses that use our technology, want to use it more, want to start a cooperation. How does it actually work? Because it's a little bit counterintuitive, to be honest. Because yeah, you can just use it. You don't even have to say who you are. It's just out there, so to say. And so the approach there is obviously a little bit different then, or it has to be different. And everything boils down essentially to a couple of factors that have to play together. One is, well, basically you get it out there and you hope that you can generate a lot of adoption. So you want to have many people use it, potentially even give you feedback, and then just use it. And then it depends a little bit on how you structure everything around that. For us, that's, for example, that we help. So it can be something like support and consulting. We also have some minor, well, not minor, but some additional premium products or premium functionality around the open source core. So you have the open source core, and then depending on what you want to do, or you get to a certain point where you need something else, then we might have there already something, or we can help you with that. So this is essentially the take that you have to take there, or which we are taking. And the idea behind it is really that you get it out there, you get visibility as a company, and you get the technology into the hands of people and companies. And then when they want to do more, have more, whatever that more exactly is, that they can come back to you. And obviously you don't right from the start have this direct communication with them because you don't know who they are. The whole idea is really that there's such a large number of them that even that little bit that gets back to you is big enough, and that you have to drive that.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I would like to come back to you, Cédric. So yeah, that's the people who know me know that I used to be working for Obeo some time ago, and I remember that in those old days, I think most of the business was on service consulting, and I have the impression that you managed to move to a more product-oriented business. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, the whole making money with open source, at least enough money so that it's sustainable. And well, I myself too get this question a lot as a CEO, even if you ask and discuss with other CEO, or you go to financial organizations and you're like, well, we develop innovative technologies, publish them freely for anyone on the planet to do pretty much what they want. And you either get front face or questions like, what's the catch? And there is no catch. And Philipp, I think, summarized the thing pretty well. For us, it's twofold, as you said, Gaël. First, we provide service expertise training, and we help our customers in using the technology, adapting it to their domain, their constraints. So we are developing the tech. So we are the best to do that. And customers also found new features or improvement for us to develop as open innovation directly in the product. For instance, in the latest Eclipse Serious release, there are improvement into how diagrams are laid out, how things are displayed, and this is sponsored work. The engine of Axelio is being refactored to offer even better performance and validation, and these are all sponsored work also. So this is the first area. The second one is we build also commercial products and add-ons on top of it, working with the open source products. So let's take Eclipse Serious, the desktop edition, because now we have two editions, but with the open source product, you can build your own graphical modeler. So your complete modeling environment based on the Eclipse RCP very quickly, pretty easily, and use it and deploy it within your organization, and you don't need Obio to do that. But Obio do sell an add-on to Serious, which is called Obio Designer Team, so that you can enable frictionless collaboration on your model. So think about it like editing your models concurrently like you do in Google Doc. And so these are the kind of, well, premium product, you use that word, Philipp, that we do provide. And indeed, we're expanding this product-based business over the year. So one step at a time. It takes quite a lot of efforts and investment, but growing this part of the revenues as also the service revenue grows at the same time.
Yeah. Now, so am I correct if that you, for example, you have some products for verticals that are not open source at all?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So we have we also built a product which is called Smart EA, which is a modeling environment dedicated to enterprise architecture. So this is a vertical. This is completely based on all the open source technologies we develop, but focused on an area which is enterprise architecture. And this is a product we do provide like any kind of software vendor, but this is based on all these open technologies. It's really extensible and so on. So which makes us slightly different based on compared to the competitions. And well, we have another vertical area which is on model-based system engineering, but on this one, it all rely on Capella, which is another open source product, and for which we do provide the collaborative capabilities that we provide on any kind of serious-based modeler, because Capella is a serious-based modeler. And we also provide more and more add-ons for this vertical.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so one question back to you, Philipp. So Cédric just told us that they have regular contracts of sponsored developments or some improvement to the open source projects that are funded by customers. Is it also something that you already have, or?
Yes, that happens as well. So we're basically both situations. I must say for us, it's like both situations, really contracted work that goes directly into the open source version as well. And on the other hand, also just custom integrations, custom functionality or something like that, which doesn't go into the open source version. So we really have both of them. And I must say that the latter is something that we actually see more often. So the one that somebody comes from the outside and then tells us, hey, we need this and that in there, could we do something about it? Or have you thought about that? Or they see something on the timeline and then they say, hey, it would be really cool if we could maybe move that up a little bit. And we have that as well. So yes, that happens. But what we see even a little bit more often is that they want something quite specific for themselves. And that doesn't go into the open source version.
Yeah,
so it really depends.
Sure. Okay, so that's just again to summarize. So I would say open source helps you with adoption, so that gives you more visibility to your company and technologies. And then there is a consulting and support in deploying the technologies or sponsored developments or premium products. That's the three main, that's what I heard from you. I guess there may be other business models around open source, but at least what I like is that it's your concrete illustration of how to do business with open source technologies.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that gives to both of us. Like for us to summarize, it's a little bit like you have an open core, which is very powerful, and you can do a lot with that. And then the question just comes, okay, now I want to do more. And what's that more? It's something like very specific for you that doesn't exist. So please help me with this. Or I have a very, very big project. I only need the open source part, but just to get it up and running even more quickly, or to get all the stones in position right from the start, please help me a little bit with that. Or you want something further additional functionality, and it already exists, and that part is premium.
Cool. Well, next. next question is okay, to Philipp. So we mentioned that membership and working in Eclipse that increased your visibility. So can you give us maybe something more specific about it? How it works? Like, is it just because you met people in a conference? Is it what else?
Yeah. Sometimes it's actually that, not so much last year, but yes.
Sure.
So it's really getting into contact with other people and from the space, I'd say. So in my case, it's really, or in our case, we are part of the IoT working group. That ecosystem there with regards to IoT is quite big, I'd say, also with big companies. And they always are there, obviously also with the right people. And then you talk to them, they get to know you, they might even already know you or use you, and then you actually get into contact with them. And these are typically the right people within their organizations also that are part of an architecture team or that drive new initiatives and things like that. So that's actually a great way to connect there, actually. Then the next thing is, so that's just a part that's rather concrete because there you're in direct contact, because there's a lot that you don't see directly. So in our case, it's really we see download rates, so we can maybe track how many times something has been downloaded, but we not necessarily know exactly where that comes from. So typically we don't know it at all. And there it's really just nice to see how big those download rates are, and sometimes even how something like an announcement of Eclipse then spikes maybe certain download rates as well. And then you can basically correlate that with that or trace it a little bit back to that. And it's something rather indirect and for that, or hard to quantify actually, but that I'm sure that it's there because we also see it in part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the second time I think that you mentioned the fact that you don't know who is downloading, and
Yeah.
I know that's potentially something that is not so easy from your side as entrepreneurs. That I sometimes receive some members asking, so okay, can you tell me who is subscribed to the mailing list of my project? And we just say, well, no, sorry, it's
I mean,
we cannot do that. Maybe you and maybe that's one of the differences that between running your own project or doing it in at the Eclipse Foundation. I mean, we have those strong values of transparency, openness, but also privacy that people download, they don't have to register to download, etc. So to some extent, your core open core part is real open source and is potentially less feeding your pipeline or your funnel. But
I mean, it's just exactly the force field that you are in there. You're putting something out there, and that works great. And it's really the one you're giving something out and to many people, and you don't know them. On the other side, obviously, you would like to know as many people as possible, and that's exactly the force field which you are in, and where most companies then go the way of, well, we are not giving anything for free, and if we do it, then we need to know everything about you. And that's exactly the other route that you can take with open source, which, well, all of us did.
Yeah, and as you said, it's really indirect, right? So looking at Eclipse series, so we know people are out there doing lots of graphical modelers using Eclipse series that we never heard about. But at some point we did set up the gallery on the website so that people could tell us, well, I built this, and we could expose that on the website. Now I think we have more than 50 examples, well, 50 tools mentioned on the public gallery. And but obviously there's a lot more out there which cannot be public. Another indirect information is when you organize events and stuff like that. And we do organize SeriousCon and the forum, indeed. We do organize SeriousCon every year. And well, last June, it did gather more than 400 attendees from 50 different countries, which for our modeling, well, let's build your own modeling tool niche, I would say is pretty good. But that's a bit frustrating in some way, that you don't exactly know. But on the other way, it's just people are learning and doing by themselves and only call you when they need help. So it's also a lot less effort to assist them in
close deals.
in maturing, in discovering the tool and so on. So.
Yeah, maybe one thing may also that maybe we can get your feedback about that, is that you also created an adopters page. And by the way, there is an adopters page on both the IoT working group and on Capella. So that's also, I guess, that's a way to measure the adoption or the commitment of the larger community to the interest of the larger community.
Yeah, well, I don't know how it worked for IoT, but for the Capella adopters page, we had to, when we get in touch with these organizations, we know they use Capella and so on, and we ask them, do you want to appear on this web page? And if so, well, here is the process and so on. And well, I don't have the exact figure right now, but I think we have more than 30 organizations which identify themselves and very big names and very nice companies which decide to show the world that they're using Capella, which is pretty awesome and really helps in showing the other companies which are considering adopting it that yeah, it's used for real by others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe one question. I think that we had listed some questions, but we sometimes addressed them in previously. So one question I have is about collaborating with other members. So can you tell me a bit more, maybe starting with you, Cédric, and yeah, the collaborate. You mentioned that at the beginning with collaborating with smart people and learning from smart people, but
so sorry, I got distracted by the questions.
Okay, no problem. So my question was, can you tell us more about your collaborations with other members?
Oh,
and I guess you have some interesting stuff to say about it.
Well, with other members, as you said, at first it all started with working with people from IBM, Boron, and so on at the time, because they did create the core technologies behind Eclipse modeling in general, as EMF and GMF and all of these technologies. And so we were extending these technologies, and it came in the end of the day, it's discussions on the mailing list, working with them, developing the technologies. And well, being a member in itself also helped in set up partnership. I mentioned that with Thales, or more recently, I think it played a role here. But so Siemens identified and approached us to augment their offer on model-based system engineering at some point. And so most likely it's linked to that. And we've been working in the last few years to build the SMW product to integrate their PLM Team Center with Capella. And it's, well, as a small company like Obio, but really involved in open source and really committed to open source, it's quite exciting to see and participate in software vendors like Siemens PLM to integrate in their own product strategy and open source solution like Capella. So I think it's a pretty good sign.
And Philipp, I think that you have a specific story about a new partnership, or I mean, in your case study, you talk about meeting with the IOFOG people.
Yeah, okay. I almost, I had to, that's for example, one of the things. I mean, like many possibilities where things arise, but that's, for example, also a very nice one. IOFOG is part also of the IoT working group. And it's simply something they've been using Mosquito for quite some time already as well. And then it's in several projects, and it's quite nice to get to know them. And now they also use stream sheets. And the nice thing there is really that, well, you find them and you get really feedback, and you get also typically really good feedback because they've used the technology already. They know how it works in several ways. So from the application side, how it technically works, how from the user experience in terms of that they used it as well already. And then it's really just quite nice to get this feedback and also apply it and include it in your roadmap, what you change, and maybe also how you approach certain things. Because often enough, then also there in the whole working group is, I mean, there's many people in it that are really clever and they're working in that space, and somebody always has an idea and has seen something that you haven't so far. And then they can just say, have you seen this or that? Or by the way, there's this and this out there. Why don't you do it like this? And this helps a lot in terms of research, for example, because otherwise there are things that you just don't know, just don't see. And this way you have people helping you. And there with IOFOG, it's really nice. I mean, there's also at Eclipse, they had then examples built, for example, built with IOFOG and stream sheets and a couple of others, as well as basically showcase. And that's things that are just arise, and that's quite nice.
Okay, well, I think that maybe before asking you my last question, we can try to address the few questions we had. So I like the one from Omar, who asks us, how do you judge what should be contributed into open source and what to keep proprietary? Because I think that as CEOs of your respective organizations, that's certainly a big topic.
Yep.
Who wants to start? Go ahead. Okay, so Philipp, go ahead.
Okay, I go first. Yeah, obviously that's always an interesting question. So first, there must really be enough and good enough stuff, features, and things in the open source version. It makes no sense if you put out there, like, without saying something or wanting to say something wrong here, without putting out there a minion that doesn't really help at all, and you actually want to draw them right away directly into your premium version or into any kind of premium offerings or so. But it really has to be that the open source version itself has to give the user also something. Otherwise, all the good parts of open source, you don't get them, like adoption and so on and so forth. So that's really something, first, that the open source version has to be valid. And the second thing is then obviously, how do you, what can you offer additionally to that? In our case, they're really open core that helps you. And we approach this typically a little bit, so we're strictly business focused in the case of who do we actually charge for anything, and that's also then going, for example, a little bit into the features. Who do you want to address? And for example, the part that you don't want to address, well, they shouldn't have to pay for any functionality in this case. But on the other hand, there might be something we're talking here about, for example, special integration, authorization, and things like this. Or when the system really grows into a size where, you know, it's okay, it's not just 2, 3, 4, 5 people there working together, but it's really an organization. So that's then the point where you say, well, there it would be really quite nice if they somehow also gave you something for it, so to say bluntly. And that's then really a little bit how you approach the whole thing. You say, well, who's your target group, and what makes sense to them if they grow their usage. And that's a little bit how we approach it primarily. And then depending on that, you put something into premium offerings, or otherwise you don't. And yeah, that was, for example, one take.
Cédric?
Well, that's definitely not such an easy question indeed, but a question you get to ask yourself from time to time. And I completely agree with Philipp that you first need to create a product, an open source project, which I would say stand by itself, and which makes sense in itself and is usable and is great in itself. Otherwise, it just the whole model is not working, right? You need to put a good product out there. You have very low barrier to adoption, so the technology can get into the end of the people. But if it's only half of it, then they won't be successful enough that at some point maybe they get back to you. So you really need to have a product which makes sense, at least in my line of business, I would say. And then we think about whether this feature is something which is related to growth, like you said, Philipp. I think it's a very good point. Or, well, the growth of usage, right? What is the scale? Is it at the organization level? And also, is that a feature or a need which is, I would say, enterprise specific, right?
Okay.
So, but it tends to be pretty much the same question as the growth, right? So you have something you need, I don't know, to integrate authentication with enterprise-like systems, and this part you're going to put that into the premium one, which targets enterprise, for instance. That's how we see that. Previously with Serious Desktop, so it was mostly, it's all in the open source, and everything which is related to live collaboration is part of the premium offer. And so that was the way we did the distinction. Now that Eclipse Serious is moving to the web, that we did the first release of Serious Web in October, and we are working a lot on this, and we have the premium offer, then it's more about the enterprise services, the growth of usage, and this is part of the premium. But we are mostly focused on building a product which stand on its own, which you can use to create a modeling tool from end to end directly from your web browser. You should not have to open Eclipse IDE or whatever to create a web-based tool. That's what we're working on right now. So mostly on the open source now.
Yeah. So when I am asked this question about what to put in open source and not in open source, I think that my answer summarize what you just said is that be honest, don't fail your users or your adopters. That what you provide is in open source is really open source. And maybe that the main role in a good open source strategy is to have a product marketing manager, or that it becomes part of the product marketing manager to decide this feature. And maybe in your company you have this role, but that's really to decide which feature should stay proprietary or be a premium feature, and which feature what should be open source.
Yeah, it all comes down to the vision you have of the product, right? So
yeah, definitely. So that's yeah. Good. Next question is well, let's take the one from Christophe in the chat. So that can you use Eclipse as a so the fact that you are a member of the Eclipse Foundation, is it a selling argument to your customers? or the fact that it's open source. So maybe that's two different complementary things.
The fact that the technology we build within Eclipse is open, it's definitely a key factor for my customers, which tend to be big corporation and with long-term commitment to industrial products in aircraft, in energy or transport or whatever, and they want to make sure that the software is going to be lasting, and then their tools should not depend on a small company like us. So this definitely gives us this lasting guarantee, at least from an IP point of view, and from the project has a good governance. So it's important to them. And also on the other hand, I think maybe the question is also about Eclipse as a platform, and this was a very strong argument for Obio, especially at the beginning, because so many tools were based on this platform, and that was kind of the guarantee that you could extend and maybe mix other tools from other vendors, and in the end have something which works. So in that way, the Eclipse platform was also a pretty strong selling point.
And so, yes, it's a platform effect. Do you have the same platform effect in the IoT ecosystem?
Yeah, it helps to redifferentiate a little bit between open source and then also Eclipse, because there's a little bit of a still a distinction there, because there are many fruits you can reap with just open source, but the moment that people dig a little bit deeper into and actually thinking about using your technology more and potentially actually integrating it, and what's also the case with us, then not just use it themselves, but especially also sell it to their customers, then there's really this liability issue that you have there potentially. If you just use an open source from somebody else, it is open source, they tell you they did good due diligence, which they probably did, and everything is all right, but just with this Eclipse stamp, they actually know that behind that there is this foundation that does all this due diligence for them, and they can be assured that all the libraries that they use, all the other technology that's in there is actually open source, so I don't have to face any potential legal issues. It's a little bit unsexy maybe that topic, but it's really, really important.
That's an interesting one, yes. That's a very interesting one, because that's I think that with this topic of IP due diligence, we have two questions about the comparison of the Eclipse ecosystem regarding to just pushing to GitHub, and that's typically one of the features you get from being a member of Eclipse. Having your project hosted at Eclipse means that you have this stamp that okay, users can trust that the IP is clean.
Yeah, exactly. So that really helps. So for us, that's something that, especially with bigger companies, then that we see a lot. That then at least at some point it comes up, or it doesn't even come up anymore. And then later on, it's just mentioned in a conversation or so, because you had that stamp already. Otherwise, these are exactly interesting points for them already. Open source in general. Obviously can be really interesting, or is there quite interesting, and the questions are always something like, well, especially for a bigger organization, if it's open source, they know they always have like this fallback strategy, so to say. They don't have, like Cédric just said, have to 100% necessarily rely on that this company is there, because they essentially can also use big parts of it or all of it, what they are already doing, just themselves, also without that company. But still, they have the assurance from the Eclipse side, so to say, that everything is in order, and to make everything, or to realize everything in the best way, they obviously have the contact to the people that know it best, which is in our case us, in Cédric's case it's them, and can work together with them.
Yeah, I think there's Christoph, which mentioned this. How does Eclipse help if you aren't on the market anymore? Well, you mentioned the IP, and there's a whole governance, right? So every project which is hosted at Eclipse is following the Eclipse development process and also has the clear governance into which means the door is open, right? All the work Obio is doing on Eclipse series, for instance, is right there. Anybody can participate. Any organization can start contributing and have a say in how the project is run and so on. And this, you don't get it on GitHub, right? It's just on GitHub, you just have a framework so that you can publish things. You don't have such rules which allow anybody to at some point maybe participate more in the project and maybe lead it and maybe, well, whatever. On the other hand, it means we have to be very good at what we do, but it's anybody could just jump in and start doing consulting work on Eclipse series, and even somebody which is not from Obio, it's not a problem. And well, that's useful for such organizations to know they have this fallback plan.
Yep. Yeah, one thing is that we mentioned the IP due diligence, etc. But that's not the only service offered by the Eclipse Foundation. So when you compare hosting your project at the Eclipse Foundation regarding to just pushing your code to GitHub, for example, there is also this marketing initiatives and building of the ecosystem. So that's, I mean, we put the stamp on makes things easier for the software supply chain, but we also do more and more on the marketing side to promote the technologies and also to promote our entrepreneurial environment. Well, I think that we should come to a conclusion now. So maybe to jump to the last question we had is, do you have any advice for companies who consider joining the tribe and becoming members of the Eclipse Foundation? Cédric, let's start with you.
Well, I would say first, well, get involved in the project, in the technical communities, work with the projects, maybe create a project. Start by doing the work, and then becoming a member is a natural step. And you have to get involved and actively participate to receive value from membership. So I would say start from that and see if it's well helpful for you then to be a member. I know maybe it doesn't. The Eclipse Foundation would like people to just be a member and maybe participate after. That maybe makes things better from.
No. I like your point.
Yeah, well, it's for the long term, right? So
yes, engage first and become a member. Or
yeah,
I have observed that members who don't engage in the project, they don't last, because I think that in our corporate presentations, we have this slide saying that we are code first, and that's really an open source foundation. If you don't collaborate on the source code, on the technical topics, then it's more complicated at some point.
It can't last, right? At some point, somebody is going to ask what's in it for us.
Philipp, any addition, any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing behind like getting started is actually not that hard, I'd say. you can pretty much then. So first, I'd say like the big question is you start your project and then you decide whether to actually open sources or not. So that question typically comes first. And then obviously you can take a legal path or so, this pro and cons or whatever is your favorite fashion there. But in the end, it boils down to whether you want to make it open source your project or not. And the nice thing with Eclipse then there is if you identify that it fits. So for example, if you did anything in IoT, I'd say it's absolutely the right place. For other things, it might not be, but there it definitely is. And then the cool thing there is that you can really just boost all the pros, so to say, of the open source parts there. And getting started is actually quite simple. I mean, in this case, then I typically always try to do it like this, to be honest. Start your project first, work on it, and then along the way you see when and how it makes actually sense. And then you still are basically at the same point and can do that quite in your project and develop it. And then you can simply join the foundation and then think about integrating your project and how you're going to integrate that. And this already sounds a little bit more complicated than it in the end actually is. It takes some time until it gets through this different phases. That's like can be annoying because it takes time, but the good thing is then later on you have all the stamps and everything together and the pros of it as well. And on the other side, it's really, you can start out in these working groups, and the point is really how much you want to engage there. The more you do, the more you get connected to people, but that's really up to you and how fast and how you want to do it. So it's quite simple actually to scale it to the extent that you want to do it, and then you can really just do it.
Thanks. So thanks for your time, guys. Well, we really appreciate the time you dedicated to help us publish those case studies and to be with us today. This year we will be launching an entrepreneurial open source podcast with Tabang. Mashologu, who is our VP marketing, and that will give us the opportunity to share more stories like your stories. One thing or two specific messages I have is that when in the window you use to launch Zoom, you should see a link to the post-event survey. So please, for the attendees, spend I think that's 1 or 2 minutes you need to fill this survey. Also, so we had Philipp today talking about IoT and what Cedalo is doing in IoT. So we just launched our 2021 IoT and Edge commercial adoption survey. And so you will, there is a link in the thanks and so on. So please use the link in the chat and go to this survey. That you cannot imagine how much impact your answers in this survey have, because we have every year we have lots of participation in this survey, and since we started to do it many years ago, that's something that is really framing the ecosystem around open source IoT. So thanks everybody. Thanks for your time. We are just on time, and have a good evening or a good day wherever you live. And talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye bye.
Bye.